As for Ben, he was less afraid of a whipping than of his father's disapprobation. Mr. Franklin, as I mentioned before, was a sagacious man, and also inflexibly upright one. He had read much for a person in his rank of life, and had pondered upon the ways of the world, until he had gained more wisdom than a whole library of books could have taught him. Ben had a greater reverence for his father than for any other person in the world, as well on account of his spotless integrity as of his practical sense and deep view of things. Consequently, after being released from the clutches of the law, Ben came into his father's presence with no small perturbation of mind. "Benjamin, come hither," began Mr. Franklin in his customary solemn and weighty tone. The boy approached and stood before his father's chair, waiting reverently to hear what judgment this good man would pass upon his late offense. He felt that now the right and wrong of the whole matter would be made to appear. "Benjamin," said his father, "what could induce you to take property which did not belong to you?" "Why, father," replied Ben, hanging his head at first, but then lifting eyes to Mr. Franklin's face, "if it had been merely for my own benefit, I never should have dreamed of it. But I knew that the wharf would be a public convenience. If the owner of the stones should build a house with them, nobody will enjoy any advantage except himself. Now, I made use of them in a way that was for the advantage of many persons. I thought it right to aim at doing good to the greatest number." "My son," said Mr. Franklin solemnly, "so far as it was in your power, you have done a greater harm to the public than to the owners of the stones." "How can that be, father?" asked Ben. "Because," answered his father, "in building your wharf with stolen materials, you have committed a moral wrong. There is no more terrible mistake than to violate what is eternally right for the sake of a seeming expediency. Those who act upon such a principle do the utmost in their power to destroy all that is good in the world." "Heaven forbid," said Benjamin. "No act," continued Mr. Franklin, "can possibly be for the benefit of the public generally which involves injustice to any individual. It would be easy to prove this by examples, but indeed, can we suppose that our all-wise and just Creator would have so ordered the affairs of the world that a wrong act should be the true method of attaining a right end? It is impious to think so. And I do verily believe, Benjamin, that almost all the public and private misery of mankind arises from a neglect of this great truth, that evil can only produce evil, that good ends must be wrought out by good means." "I will never forget it again," said Benjamin, bowing his head. "Remember," concluded his father, "that whenever we vary from the highest rule of right, just so far we do an injury to the world. It may seem otherwise for the moment, but both in time and in eternity it will be found so." To the close of his life, Ben Franklin never forgot this conversation with his father, and we have reason to suppose that in most of his public and private career he endeavored to act upon the principles which that good and wise man had then taught him. After the great event of building the wharf, Ben continued to cut wick yarn and fill candle molds for about 2 years, but as he had no love for that occupation, his father often took him to see various artisans at their work in order to discover what trade he would prefer. Thus Ben learned the use of a great many tools, the knowledge of which afterwards proved very useful to him. But he seemed much inclined to go to sea. In order to keep him at home, and likewise to gratify his taste for letters, The lad was bound apprentice to his elder brother, who had lately set up a printing office in Boston. Here he had many opportunities of reading new books and of hearing instructive conversation. He exercised himself so successfully in writing compositions that when no more than 13 or 14 years old, he became a contributor to his brother's newspaper. Ben was also a versifier, if not a poet. He made 2 doleful ballads, one about the shipwreck of Captain Worthilake, and the other about the pirate Blackbeard, who, not long before, infested the American seas. When Ben's verses were printed, his brother sent him to sell them to the townspeople, wet from the press. "Buy my ballads!" shouted Benjamin as he trudged through the streets with a basketful on his arm. "Who'll buy a ballad about Blackbeard? A penny apiece! A penny apiece! Who'll buy my ballads?" If one of those roughly composed and rudely printed ballads could be discovered now, it would be worth more than its weight in gold. In this way our friend Benjamin spent his boyhood and youth until, on account of some disagreement with his brother, he left his native town and went to Philadelphia. He landed in the latter city, a homeless and hungry young man, and bought 3 pence worth of bread to satisfy his appetite. Not knowing where else to go, he entered a Quaker meeting house, sat down, and fell fast asleep. He has not told us whether his slumbers were visited by any dreams, but it would have been a strange dream indeed, and an incredible one, that should have foretold how great a man he was destined to become, and how much he would be honored in that very city where he was now friendless and unknown. So here we finish our story of the childhood of Benjamin Franklin. One of these days, if you would know what he was in his manhood, you must read his own works and the history of American independence.